The sound of a metal door slamming shut echoed through the concrete halls of ADX Florence, a sound Eric Rudolph hadn't heard in 5 years of hiding. He once vanished into the Appalachian wilderness, living off berries, rainwater, and belief. Now, he was a ghost in a cage built for America's most dangerous minds. If stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe, because this one only gets darker. Inside the Alcatraz of the Rockies, silence was the loudest punishment. Every cell was a world of concrete, with light that never dimmed and a window too small to show the sky. Rudolph had spent years praying in the shadows, convinced he was carrying out divine justice. But here, faith met steel. ADX wasn't just a prison, it was an experiment in psychological endurance. Inmates like the Unabomber and Ramsey Youssef paced behind doors that never opened, while guards spoke through intercoms instead of faces. For Rudolph, who once claimed to be guided by God, this was a new kind of wilderness, one where silence replaced scripture. He was the man who turned the 1996 Olympic Games into a scene of terror. A pipe bomb, hidden beneath a park bench, killed 1 and injured over 100. The nation called it an act of evil. Rudolph called it a mission. When they finally caught him in the small town of Murphy, North Carolina, he looked less like a terrorist and more like a relic, bearded, thin, eyes hollow with conviction. But here, in Florence, he wasn't a prophet. He was inmate 18282-058. His days began with a metallic click, food trays sliding in, then silence. The only break came during rec, a 1-hour walk in a concrete cage the size of a single-car garage. There, he'd stare up at a strip of blue sky like it was an illusion. He wasn't alone, yet he never saw another face. Just echoes, Ted Kaczynski's pacing, Youssef's muttered prayers, the distant hum of electric locks. The staff avoided small talk. To them, he was another extremist, another man who twisted belief into bloodshed. But to Rudolph, ADX was proof that America feared more than violence, it feared conviction. He started writing. Letters. Manifestos. Notes he hoped would outlive the walls. But every word was screened, censored, logged. He was losing the only freedom he'd ever claimed, the freedom to preach. Then one night, the lights flickered. A brief blackout, something that wasn't supposed to happen in Florence. For 3 minutes, the fortress went dark. And in those 3 minutes, Eric Rudolph whispered something to the darkness that would set off a chain of questions no one was ready to answer. He leaned close to the slot in his door and murmured, "Even here, I am not alone." The blackout lasted 187 seconds, not long enough to trigger an alarm, but long enough to plant suspicion in the heart of a fortress built on control. When the lights snapped back, every door in the control unit buzzed with tension. Guards whispered about an electrical surge. Engineers blamed a fault in the isolation grid. But in ADX Florence, nothing just happened. Eric Rudolph said nothing. He sat cross-legged on his bed, staring at the narrow beam of light that returned through his slit of a window. To him, it wasn't a malfunction, it was a sign. Days passed, but the air inside the special housing unit thickened. One of the guards, a veteran named Harlan, noticed small things out of place. A commissary sheet slid under the wrong door, a message scratched faintly into the concrete near cell D12. It read, "He is listening." Rudolph never spoke to anyone directly, but somehow, his words began moving through the prison, not on paper, but through whispers. Inmates who had never seen his face began quoting him during morning counts, muttering fragments of scripture mixed with coded phrases. A rumor spread that he had converted one of the guards. Nobody could prove it. But in a place where solitude ruled every second, the idea that words could travel without contact terrified the staff. Florence ran on order. One breach, even psychological, was a threat. When the warden heard that inmates were reciting parts of Rudolph's old manifesto during rec time, he ordered a full lockdown. Cells were searched, letters confiscated, ventilation covers unscrewed. But all they found were a few shreds of paper, each one blank. Inside his cell, Rudolph smiled. To him, the walls were only symbols, barriers meant for men who didn't believe. he began tapping on the pipes in rhythmic patterns. At first, no one understood it. But in a place where silence was a weapon, patterns became language. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was 2 cells away, and though they never saw each other, both men began tapping back. 2 ideologues. 2 outcasts. Communicating in code through steel. The guards noticed, of course. But by the time they isolated Rudolph further, something had already changed. The men around him, terrorists, murderers, traitors, started speaking differently. Quieter. More reflective. One inmate reportedly refused his meal, saying, "The messenger told us hunger purifies." The administration saw it as manipulation. Rudolph saw it as revival. In interviews later declassified, psychologists from the Bureau of Prisons described him as a study in conviction, unbroken, unrepentant, and strangely persuasive. They feared that even in total isolation, he was recruiting. Not soldiers, but believers. Then came the note. During a routine inspection, a guard found a slip of lined paper wedged beneath the food slot. On it, in sharp, neat handwriting, "You can lock the body, not the will. The light returns soon." It wasn't signed. But they knew the hand. The message was dated 1 day before another blackout, this one lasting 5 full minutes. Cameras froze. The intercom system dropped. When the power returned, something impossible appeared on the monitors, a line of inmates in their wrecked cages, all standing silently, facing east. No one had told them to. And from cell D13, Eric Rudolph began to hum a low, steady tune, a hymn that spread through the corridors like a pulse beneath the concrete. By the time morning came, the entire control unit was under emergency lockdown. Guards moved in tight formations, radios hissing, the air heavy with the kind of silence that means something has gone wrong, deeply wrong. No one could explain how a dozen men, sealed in soundproof cells, had synchronized their actions the night before. No communication, no sight lines, no human contact. Yet every camera showed the same eerie image, each inmate standing still, hands folded, eyes fixed toward the sliver of dawn through their concrete cages. For the Bureau of Prisons, it was impossible. For Eric Rudolph, it was prophecy. They dragged him from his cell that morning, hands cuffed, ankles shackled, eyes burning with something between calm and defiance. He didn't resist. He never did. The chaplain who accompanied the extraction team later said Rudolph whispered just one sentence as they led him down the corridor: "You built your walls too close to heaven." They moved him to deeper isolation, a room few ever saw, no window, no slot, no sound but the mechanical hiss of ventilation. A black cell, designed to erase men who refused to break. But the thing about conviction is that it doesn't fade in the dark. It grows. Weeks passed. The hymn he started had vanished, but traces of it remained, humming in the pipes, murmured under breath during counts. Psychologists cycled in, trying to measure the damage. What they found was stranger than expected. Inmates who claimed they'd never heard his voice still reported dreams about him. In those dreams, he wasn't preaching hate or chaos. He was walking barefoot through pine trees, whispering prayers into the wind. It didn't matter what was true anymore. In Florence, myth and man had merged. Eric Rudolph had become an idea, and ideas don't serve sentences. Then, one day, the letters stopped. For years, his correspondence had been screened, copied, and cataloged, long essays about faith, judgment, and the false gods of progress. But in early spring, the mailroom reported nothing. No outgoing, no incoming. The logbook ended abruptly. Some say he'd finally gone quiet, that the years had broken even his faith. Others believe silence was his last sermon. When a journalist from the Denver Post requested an interview years later, the Bureau denied it. Inmate refuses all external communication, the letter read. No statement to be released. But the guard who once escorted him to rec claimed otherwise. He said Rudolph never refused, the messages just never made it out. Inside ADX Florence, Men who'd once sworn never to prey started quoting him again. Not as manifestos, not as justifications, but as warnings. The light returned soon. It became a phrase scratched into tables, into walls, into the backs of notebooks confiscated by staff. They couldn't stop it. And somewhere beneath the Rockies, in a cell built to silence the world's most dangerous men, a faint echo still traveled through the pipes, rhythmic, steady, almost like breathing. They called him a fanatic. A terrorist. A man consumed by belief. But in a place designed to erase identity, Eric Rudolph had done the one thing no one else had managed to do. He made the silence speak. If you think this story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.